Yeah. Okay, we're going to start the Mishnah. Hahalel v'simcha shmoina ketzad. So we say the full Hallel, and we're supposed to be happy on the Yom Tov for a full 8 days. So the Chiddush here is that they're including Melamed Shechai V'Adam V'Hallel V'Simcha V'Chavod Yom Tov V'Achron Shel Chag Keshar Kol Yemei Chag. What's the Chiddush here in this statement? That you say Hallel Simcha 8 days, it's included in the last day of Yom Tov of Sukkah, Shmini Atzeres. That means when it says that you have to be rejoiced, you ain't simcha ela b'basar v'yayin. There's no simcha unless you have meat and wine, and the only way you can eat meat is if you bring shlamim. So you bring shlamim all 8 days, and you say the full halacha. The Gemara continues, Menahanemili. From where do we know these things that a person is chayev in simcha and halal all 8 days? The Tanu Rabbana, we learned in a Braysa, Vayita Ach Sameach. It says in the pasuk, V'samachta b'chagecha, Vayisa Ach Sameach. So what's the word Ach? Ach means, so here he translates nothing but. Ach means it's a very unique. I guess it's not, the word very unique doesn't exist. It's a unique word to say in the Torah. It's not a common word. And obviously this word is coming to teach us something else, which is what? That you're also chayev in simcha, which is the shlamim, on the last day of Yom Tov. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Maybe it's coming to teach us that on the first Yom Tov we should have it. Why? Because we would think that on the first Yom Tov has its own korban, for sure, from the Torah, its own korban, so maybe you don't have to bring shlamim. So he says, Shroimer Ach Chilik. Ach is the terminology. If it would want to say the first days of Yom Tov, it would have said Rak only. But when it says Ach, he is including and separating for the last day. It's an addition. As the Gemara, Omar, why is it that you're saying that this is including? So you explained to me that the word ach is more of an inclusion, not an exclusion. So okay, so why are you including the last days? Why not the first night of the Yom Tov Rishon? So he says there's a difference. Why? If it's an inclusion, it has to be included in what was before it. So if we're including something, 1 plus 1 equals 2, but you have to have the one before. So what we're saying is that all the 7 days we already know from a different place that you have to have simcha. Because it says Chag Sukkah Tasala Chag is a celebration, is a holiday. So we know that Chag Sukkah Tasala Shivas Yamim, and the word Ach means to include what was before that it should continue. But on the first day before that, there was no Yom Tov. So therefore, we have to explain that the word Ach is coming to teach us Shmini Atzeres, the day of Shmini Atzeres, and not the first day of Yom Tov. Okay, we're going to the next mission. We're on page 48a on the second mission. Sukkah, Shiva Ketzad. How do you fulfill the mitzvah of Sukkah on the 7 days? So what does it come to teach us? Gomar melechol lo yatir sukkosei. Let's say you finished eating in the morning of the 7th day. He shouldn't undo his sukkah. However, avomoidus lekelim in a mincha velamala. He's allowed to take down some of the utensils or furnishings or vessels that they used to put inside the sukkah to represent that that's the place that you're living. You're allowed to bring them inside. Why? In the honor of Shmini Atzeres, the last day, the Yom Tov of Chag, why do you have to take your vessels, furniture? Is people like to prepare their table, prepare their meal area. In those days, they prepared a meal area with maybe cushions and couches. So in order to prepare for the last day of Yom Tov, from the mincha and forward, you're allowed to take the items from the sukkah and bring them inside the house. So the Gemara asks a question: if he doesn't have any vessels, the purpose of moving is almost like a concept of, this is the first step of leaving the sukkah and going into the last day of Yom Tov. So we're not taking down the sukkah completely, but we're making a sign that we're already moving. So if that's the case, that the reason that we're moving the vessels is because we want to demonstrate that the sukkah is pretty much over. We didn't take down the sukkah, but we made our first step. Then if you don't have vessels, how do you make that step? So the Gemara says, "Ein lo kelim." He has no vessels. Ela ki ishtamish v'ma ishtamish. When he was in the sukkah all week long, what did he use? He must have had some chairs, some cushions, some tables, some vessels. So the Gemara says, "Ela en la makom lahor kelim mahol." If he doesn't have a place to put his vessels, which to me, if somebody else has a different explanation, but this is what he says. Rav Chia Barashi gives a different explanation. He answers, he says, Peiches Barba, there's two ways to make that distinction between Sukkot and Mincha and below, from Mincha and above, from the time of Mincha and forward, you need to make a distinction. So what's the distinction? He says, Peiches Barba, he goes to the Tzchach and he opens up the Tzchach for Tfachim, and therefore the Sukkah is already not a kosher Sukkah. He opens it up. Levi Omar, Madlik Vasaner. Levi says, you light the light. You light a candle. And we explained that certain sukkahs that are small, you're not allowed to light a candle in them. So by lighting a candle, you're already eliminating the sukkah. The Gemara says, Halon, Halahu. So this is very interesting. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is from Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Chia bar Ashi is from Bavel. But their students were the opposite. Most of the students of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi were from Bavel, and most of the students of Rabbi Chia bar Ashi were from Eretz Yisrael. And he said that each one said a statement in honor of their students, because the ones in Eretz Yisrael had a smaller and why is that? Is because the ones in Eretz Yisrael have a know when the 8th day is, so there's no doubt. So therefore, you could go ahead and literally make the sukkah not kosher. That's what Rav Barashi says. Because we know that that day is the 8th day, and there's no doubt that it's the 8th or the 9th or the 7th. We don't have doubts. But in Bavel, since you have doubts, it's better to light a candle instead of completely make the sukkah unkosher. But it's really interesting that they said the halachas in honor of their students. So the Gemara says like this: Hatina sukkah ktana. That Levi says he lights a candle in it. So that kind of shows and demonstrates to everyone who sees it and for himself that the sukkah is not kosher, that he's not spending time in the sukkah. However, sukkah gdala ma'ikala meikla. You're allowed. There's no problem in lighting a candle in a large sukkah. So how does the word of Levi affect the status of the sukkah? So he answers the ma'ayal by mane michle, that one brings in utensils, which means like dishes or pots that are dirty, that are not clean yet, and he brings it to the sukkah. That demonstrates everybody who sees these plates or dishes knows that the sanctity of the sukkah, the mitzvah, is already diminished and is moving away. And Rava says, "Mane michle bar mi talalta." It could be soiled dishes, dirty dishes. So he says you should take everything out of the sukkah, except we're talking about in the 7 days. Rav was saying you should take out. Let's say you finish eating with your plate or your pot or your serving dish, you should not leave it in the sukkah, except mane mishtaya b'metlalalta. You're allowed to leave cups. So any other type of serving dish, once you leave it, it starts to get kind of repulsive, disgusting. But cups that you drank from, they're not so repulsive. So you don't have, during the 7 days, you can leave your cups. Maybe you want to recycle, take another sip. So he's qualifying that really it's referring to the dishes, all types of dishes except cups. I think what they're trying to say is that it's important to know that this is the last day and Sukkot is finished, and we're not going back to the Sukkot. Maybe there was something more. I'm not sure. So the question was, what's the reason that we may need to make that distinction after Mincha? So he explains down here that the concern is that people are comfortable with the sukkah. Maybe it's pleasant outside. And on the 9th day, which is Simchas Torah by Chutz La'aretz, or if you, in the case that you had Suffolk, even in Eretz Yisrael, you will still continue eating in the sukkah. And then the concern is of Baal Taisif. You're not allowed to add. One of the halachas in Torah says that you're not allowed to add to any of the mitzvahs of the Torah. And by sitting and eating in the sukkah the 9th day, it seems like you're adding to the mitzvahs of the Torah. And therefore, you need to make a distinction for yourself and for people who see you, in case you sit in the sukkah because it's nice and pleasant and you decided to have your meal outdoors. Everybody sees the dirty dishes or the candle, or they see the four tvachim. So that reminds them and you that you're not adding chas v'sholom to the mitzvahs of the faith? So that was a good question. Thank you. We're continuing now on to the third Mishnah in one page. We're on Memches Amud Aleph 48a3 on the third Mishnah. Nisu Chamaim Ketzad. How did they do the? He uses the term water libation. I'm not sure if there's any other translation. Sounds very fancy. Nisu Chamaim, when they would pour the water on top of the Mizbeach. So, Tzleichi Shazav, they used to use a flask of gold that would hold 3 lugim. And Hayam Emalim in a Shiloach. He would fill this flask of gold from the Shiloach river, more spring. They came to the water gate. What's the water gate? They called it the water gate because from there it was the closest way to go to the Shiloach, and that's the gate that they would go walking to bring the water for Nisu Hamayim. So they would reach that point, Taku, Viriyu Vitaku, they would sound the Tkiya, the Trua and the Tkiya. And then when they would come back, how would they bring the water up to the Mizbeach? So the Kohen would Allah Bekevish, he would go on the ramp. So he would come from the right, he would go to his left, and on the left of the Mizbeach, up the ramp, there were 2 silver bowls, and he says that they were both at the southwestern corner of the altar. We could use Mr. Rabbi Lego Man right now. And he would pour the water into these two bowls, silver bowls. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, in the footnotes, there's an interesting point. Is it in the footnotes or? Yeah. In the footnotes, he brings a very interesting point. How could you take from a golden flask and pour water into a silver flask? There's always a statement that says "Mailim b'kodesh ve'ein moridin." You could only go up in holiness, but you can't go down. So by taking it from gold to silver, it's almost like a reduction of status. So that was an interesting question. You know, you're lowering. No, it's going to tell you. Then they had 2 holes, and it would pour into the sheathing, into those. He says here in the notes that lechem aponim, once it was put on the shulchan, which was a golden table, you can't remove it and put it anywhere else but a golden table, because again, it's lowering its honor. So why here? He doesn't give the answer. I just thought it was an interesting question. He says that you have to look in Taisvis and different places. So Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Shosid Rabbi Yehuda says that they were actually made from plaster, and they weren't made out of silver. And I think Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda is referring to an issue, in his opinion, that if metal touches the Mizbeach, it becomes an issue, because you're not supposed to use metal in the Mizbeach. So he says they weren't made out, there was nothing metal up there. It was made out of plaster, some sort of concrete or something, and that's how it was. Ella, shayu mishcharim pnei yayin. They were darkened. These two bowls made out of plaster were darkened, and they had a similar look to silver. So if you were from far and you would see them, they almost shimmered like silver because of the pouring of the wine. Because every day you pour wine into these vessels, into these bowls. So over the years, that's the color they took, and that looked like it was silver. Now the Mishnah continues, says, and these bowls had holes in them. And these holes was kamin shnei chutmim dakim. They were like two thin nostrils of a nose. So when it looked like two holes of a nose. However, not exactly like a nose. Why? Echad me'uve ve'echadak. One hole was thicker and one hole was thinner. Why? You need to get a little, when you want to take something out of a bottle or of a bowl, you want to get one for air. So one was going fast, one was going slow. So the wine and the water, because on Nisuch HaMayim, they would pour one into wine, one bowl got wine, and one bowl got water. Because the beauty would be when they both finished at the same time. It wouldn't be nice if one was continuing and one was already finished. So they did it at the same time. So we just turned the page Memches Amud Beis 48b1. We just turned the page. Ma'aravoi shel mayim mizocha shel yain. The one on the west was water, and the one on the east was wine. What happens if ira shel mayim mizocha shel yain v'shel yain mizocha shel mayim? What if they made a mistake? The person confused the wine bowl with the water bowl, and vice versa. It's no problem. Yotza. It's still obligation. So it's preferred, but it's not. That doesn't have to be perfect. Rabbi Yehuda argues on Tanakama. The Tanakama says it was 3 lugin. Rabbi Yehuda says it was a log, and he also argues Haya Menasach Koshmeina. He says that it wasn't just done on Hoshana Rabbah, the Nisuch HaMayim. It was done all 8 days. And V'lemenasech, the Mishnah continues, the one who pours the water, Oimer loi hag be'yadecha, raise your hands while you pour, so we could see what you're doing. Why? Shepam echad nisech echad agabe raglav, uragmu kol ha'am v'esregim. One time, there was a kohen who poured the water, and instead of pouring it into the bowl, he poured it on his feet, because the tzdukim did not believe that you do Nisuch HaMayim because there's no reference to it in the Torah. Yeah, they were mentioning that. Yeah, and they with the Esrog, right? Right, and then he killed like a bunch of people there. Wow. Yeah, yeah. So it was very important. He brings the reason for the Nisuch HaMayim, that when Hashem created the world and he separated on the second day the waters, So Hashem created water, and then He said, "There's going to be water, amayim shemal rakia." There's going to be water that's going to be above, and there's going to be water that's going to be below. And the waters that were below were crying. And so, why do we have to be distant from Hashem? The waters above is going to be closer to Hashem. The waters below is going to be further from Hashem. And they said, we were all once the same water. We were all once in front of the king. Why is it that we're separated? And Hashem said to the water that was below, I'm going to give you the great privilege to be even higher than the waters above by coming onto the Mizbeach and being not only in front of me, but being with me. And this is the reward of the waters below, that they agreed to be down here, that Hashem said to them, your reward for accepting to be the waters below is that once a year on Sukkah, I'm going to put you onto the Mizbeach, and you're not going to be in front of me, you're going to be with me. Because the whole idea of the Mizbeach and the whole idea of what we learn in Chassidus, the ultimate goal of a mitzvah, as the terminology in Aramaic, is lishtava begufa de malka, to be vacuumed in to the body of the king. And the purpose of being vacuumed in to the body of the king is the best translation that I could do. Lishtava begufa v'malka means to be one with the king, not to be in front of the king or surrounding the king, but to be in full unity and oneness of the king. And that was the reason that Hashem gave the waters below the opportunity to come up on the Mizbeach. Okay. Sho'ev avak means a vacuum cleaner of dirt. So lishtava means to be sucked in, to be inside. Lishtava begufa de malka. The Mishnah continues, it says, you also did the Nisuch HaMayim on Shabbos. However, there was an exception. They would fill a barrel of gold that wasn't part of Hekdesh from the Shiloh on before Shabbos. Umanicha balishka, and he puts it in the chamber. However, if this barrel, nishpacha or nizgalsa, if it got poured, some of it got spilled, or it was revealed, therefore we cannot use it anymore. So what would they do? So they would refill the water. They would take the water from the kir, because the kir was always covered, and it was never revealed. The waters of the kir were not; they're always covered. Why? That wine and water that's revealed, that means it's uncovered. There, you're not allowed to bring in a mizbeach. And the worry is that a snake might have put the venom inside while the vessel was uncovered. And then you wouldn't have the correct amount. It would either be too little, because you calculate the 3 lugim to a line, and then actually it's not all water because there's some venom inside, or it's not all wine because there's venom inside. So the measurement won't be perfect. Okay. And on Emily, where do we even learn an understanding of this halacha l'Moshe Sinai of Nisuch HaMayim? Because it says in the Navi, "Ushav temayim b'sasayim," and you should draw the water and being happy and rejoicing. And Mimayne Yeshua, the pasuk continues, "Ushav temayim b'sasayim Mimayne Yeshua," from the wells of salvation. And this is the mitzvah of Nisuch HaMayim. Since we brought this pasuk, the Gemara brings a very interesting conversation. You each could go ahead and try to deduct from it. Hane tre mine. There were two heretics. Mine is people who don't believe in the Torah. And the footnote it says that the meaning they were always constantly trying to take words of Torah and using it for their nonsense and trying to make a joke out of it and trying to demonstrate certain things. And it was all for nonsense. It was all for they were trying to show that the Torah wasn't Chas v'Shalom wasn't appropriate. And for some reason the Gemara is actually telling us one of their so-called nonsense communication. Obviously, there's a tremendous lesson to be learned from it. Well, actually, if you put it in the Gemara, this is the news of the hour. I mean, anything that got into the Gemara is obviously a lesson for forever and ever, for generations, for us. So let's try to each read this Gemara and see what we could pick up from it. And I'd love to hear from anybody who has any ideas on it. There were these two clowns, these two heretics. One I can't use a better word. One name was Sasan and one name was Simcha. Amarle Sasan Simcha. Sasan said to Simcha, Ana difa minach. I am better than you. I'm greater. Why? Because it says in the Torah, or it says in the Navi, Sasan v'Simcha yasigu. That Sasan is mentioned before Simcha, and they will be attained. So you're first attained by rejoicing, and then you retain by gladness. So therefore, I'm more important. It's listed first. Amalei Simcha Sasan. Ana difa minach. I'm actually more important than you. It first says that the Jews were gladdened and then they were rejoiced. So here we see that Simcha is more important than Sasan. So each one is trying to prove who's greater. Amalei Sasan Simcha Chad Yoima Shavkuch V'Shavyuch Pravanka Dichsiv Ki V'Simcha Seiteyu. He says one day they're going to take you and make you like a scouting guard. And instead of you just being happy, you're going to have to go out and you're going to have to measure the roads and look at the bridges, check the bridges are okay over the water. And you're going to have like this mundane work. You're going to have to leave. You're going to have to get out. So like so obviously you're not so great because they're going to send you out. Amalei Simcha Sasan. One day they're going to take you out of your great status, and they're going to use you to get water, to draw water. Because what they're going to do is Shaftamayim B'Sasan, and he says you're not going to be such a great person. They're going to use you as a vessel to take water out. Because Shaftamayim B'Sasan, you should draw water with Sasan. So Sasan became a flask. So obviously you're not that important anymore. Now he continues, apparently. If anybody has any thoughts on this communication, my only thought is that when you have Sasan and Simcha that's not pure and connected to Hashem, then they're gonna send you out. You're not going to be able to be in the chamber of Hashem. He says you're going to be sent out as a foot guard. And the other one says we're going to use you as a vessel. You know, you're not going to. I mean, this is the only. Your Sasan and Simcha has to be connected to Hashem in order for it to be great, to be greatness.
It sounds to me like it's talking about that Sason is like you have to work for it, and Simcha is something that comes from Hashem. And then so
I'm just going to repeat it with Daniel is saying that Sasan and Simcha is no resource of the Leila, source of the Tata. Sasan, you have to work hard for it, but the Simcha is given to you once you do it right.
Huh? In your car. I'm just gonna jump in your car and come to basement and get me at 7.
Why? We didn't have to leave this car there.
Yeah, and we'll get back later on with
Omar,
out.
Just come at 7.
Moshe Pekar, you have your, yeah, you we could hear your conversation, so.
Really?
Omar Leahu Mina the Shmei Sasan Rabbo. There was the same clowns. His name was Sasan. He was speaking to a Rabbo, and he said, "Asidusu l'smala mimayim la'alma." You, the Jewish nation, is destined to draw water for me. You're going to be my servants and draw water for me in the world to come. Why? You're going to draw water for Sasan. So he was trying to say, he's a clown. He was trying to say, I'm more important than you in the Jewish nation because you're going to draw water for me. Amalei Ravo answer him. If it would have said, we should draw water for Sasan, maybe it's what you're saying. Now that it says that we draw water with Sasan, he said to him something very strong. That the skin of this person, we're going to make canteens out of it, and we're going to draw water with it, which means you're going to be on the lowest level. Your body's not even going to be surviving. Obviously, this was a good answer to a clown. Okay. So now the Gemara is going to discuss what it says in the Mishnah. Olav Kevish. He goes onto the ramp of the Mizbeach. You know what it says? It says in the Mishnah, Ksilki Valta, when there's a fool, answer him with foolishness. Shut him down. Shut him down. Shut him down. Not always are you supposed to even give an answer. But obviously, whatever is recorded in the Gemara was Kodesh Kodashim. So obviously, he's showing to you how to answer these types of people. Shut them down. There's different levels. Yeah, sometimes it says to ignore him. Sometimes it says don't. But in this case, Ravu decided to respond, and it was recorded forever. So basically, the very clear message is, if you think you're going to make a joke or a clown out of any pasuk in the Torah, it's not a good deal. That's pretty clear from this one. The whole idea of Sasa and Simcha of unholiness is just not, there has no place in Torah. He goes in the rap and he goes to his left. Anyone who goes up to the Mizbeach has to go on the right side of the ramp. And they do a full circle of the Mizbeach. And they go to the left. Except 3 things. That there's 3 things that you would go on the left, and you return on the same left. So you go up on the left and you go return on the left. What are they? Nisuch hamayim, Nisuch hayayin, and the when you have to do the blood of the bird oila, when there are too many bird oilers and the right side is already too busy to go up, so they let them go on the left as well. So on the footnotes, he says that these three Nisuch Hamayim, Nisuch Hayayin, and other Ta'if, when it's very busy, all are the reason is because of the smoke. That if you have to walk around the entire Mizbeach when you go up, there's a chance that the smoke would get into the water and wine, or even to the kohen, get him a little dizzy. So the issue here is that we're concerned that by the time he finishes the whole circle, he wouldn't be in such shape, or the wine would be affected by the smoke, and therefore we say you go up through the left. You don't have to do a full circle. You just go up. In that corner, you do the Nisuch Hamayim and the Yain, you go down because you go up from the left. He has the diagram over here if anybody needs it. Okay. More continue. The Mishnah says, El Shayu Mashtirin, according to, we said according to, I believe it's Rabbi Yehuda, he said that they were made out of plaster, they weren't made out of silver. But they looked silverish because they got darkened from the pouring of the wine. Bishlema the yain mashker. It makes sense what you just said, that they get dark because the bowl of wine received the wine, it would get dark. However, the bowl of water, the maya mashker, how did it get dark if you pour water into it? So that's a very good question, because it says that they were both dark. So the Gemara answers, Kevin Amad Mar, we learned in the Mishnah, since we say that if you made a mistake and you put one into the other, so there are many times that people would make that mistake. And when they would put the wine into the bowl of water, then the bowl of water would become dark. The bowl of water that's designated, it would also become dark. Okay, the Mishnah continues, and they have spouts that look like two nostrils of a nose. However, one hole was thicker and one hole was thinner, so they would both finish their moving out at the same time. It says like this: Let's say that this Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, not Rabbana. Why? Rabbi Yehuda says that with one log he would do the Nisuch Hamayim all 8 days, not just one. Dear Rabbanan, if we would say that the Mishnah is Rabbanan, kehadade ninhu. They were, if we say it's Rabbanan, they were all the same thing. There were 3 lugim, and why would the holes need to be different? So according to Rabbi Yehuda, it was like this: the wine was 3 lugim. I'm sorry, according to Rabbanan, the wine was 3 lugim, and again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, the wine was 3 lugim, and the water was 1 lug. So therefore, the whole of the water had to be very thick, because if you have a measurement of 3 lugim, you have a measurement of 1 lug, and you want them to finish the pouring out at the same time, so the 3 lugim had a thin hole, and the 1 lug had a thick hole. So the 1 lug would go out much quicker, so it could finish at the same time the 3 lugim. So it must be that the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, because if it's a Tanakama, both of them were 3 lugim, they could have been the same size hole, and they could have finished at the same time. So Gemara answers, says, Afilu Temar Rabbanan. We could say that it's also according to Tanakama. Why? Chamas Samich Maya Klish. The wine was thick and would go out slower, so therefore they had to make a thicker hole, a bit of a thicker hole. Even though the sizes were different, water comes out very easily, very smoothly. And wine, in those days, we know that the wine was a lot stronger. I mean, you could get drunk on one revis cup. A revis cup is what? How many ounces? 3.8 ounces. What a revis is? No, that's debate. Maybe 4 something ounces. I don't remember but on one cup you would have to mix it with water because it was so strong and thick. So therefore you had to have the whole of the wine a little bit thicker than the whole of the water. It makes sense. The Rabbi Yehuda, that this is if it was Rabbi Yehuda, he should have said Rachav v'kotzer. You should say that one is wider, one is narrower. But that's not what it says. It says that they were me'uve v'dak. He uses the word thick and thin. If you want to talk about a difference between 3 lugim and 1 lug, it has to be a lot more than thick or thin, because you have here 3 times the amount of wine on water. So you would really need to get it out. So not only would it be the thicker and thinner hole, it would have to be a wider and longer hole in order to make it at the same time. So it's a proof that the Mishnah is not like Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda says that there were 2 bowls, vessels, were on top of the Mizbech. Echad shel mayim v'echad shel yain. 1 water, 1 wine. Shel yain pia rachav. The wine had a much wider opening, and he uses the term rachav, wider. Shel mayim pia kotzer. Water was a shorter, narrower mouth. Why? So they both finish at the same time. Shmamina. From here we learn that Taka, the Mishnah, is not like Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah is like Tanakama. We're going to end over here. Again, we learned in honor of Rabbi Smith's speedy recovery. Can't wait till he comes back. And thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful, miraculous day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, you too.